The Full Melt Show is intended for a mature audience. It contains adult themes, adult content, and sometimes adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
It's the Full Melt Show.
Week since the Pennsylvania General Assembly passed a medical marijuana bill. Now the state Senate could take a vote on it this week. This morning, State Representative Mike Regan joins us live to discuss what the holdup seems to be, because there was cheering and advocates of this were so excited about 2 weeks ago, and we've heard really nothing since. What has happened?
Well, I think the Senate discovered when we sent it back to them for concurrence that there were some technical things that they didn't like about the way the bill was written. I don't think it's anything substantive. I just think it's technical, and they're working on it.
The House did not pass the exact version that the Senate had passed last year.
No, it came over Senate Bill 3, and we, Representative Marsico, introduced an amendment, which was basically a gut and replace amendment. A lot of very similar language, but some things were tweaked.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think? I mean, what is your prediction for when we could see a vote in the Senate?
Oh, geez, you know, I don't know, but I'm very hopeful that they just concur on the Marsico amendment, and then it sent it to the governor, and it becomes law. I mean, I think whatever technical violation or technical changes they want to make in there can be handled through the regulatory process, through the Department of Health. So I just wish they would just pass it, because there's a lot of families who are hanging on the edge on this one.
Yeah, we heard from Angela and Chris Farrow in our previous half hour. What do you think in terms of could there be a vote this week? Because we keep thinking that they're going to take a vote.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to tell. I think there's a lot of voices on both sides. I think Senator Fulmer, Senator Corman may be on different sides of this thing. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out, but I think what we really want is just concurrence.
Now, you, when you were elected, were not an advocate necessarily for this, but you've kind of become one during your term as state representative. Tell me what kind of changed your mind, or what ignited this issue for you?
Well, as you know, Allie, I was a U.S. Marshal for many years, and as a matter of fact, I think you were probably with us on some ride-alongs when we arrested people for distribution and importation of marijuana. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit of a tough leap for me, but you talk to those moms with those children with epilepsy, you talk to cancer patients, and my wife and I actually lived it with my father-in-law who had cancer and had to illegally heal himself, and I mean, it's just heart-wrenching. And when you think about being a parent of one of those children, it's easy to get on board with it.
And I think that's one of the distinctions that some people maybe don't make easily, is that this is not legalizing recreational use of marijuana.
It is not. It's very strictly medical, and it's oil, pill, tinctures, salve. It's not smoking it, and it's not the same thing. It's a completely different animal.
What would you want to say to the people? Because, I mean, there seems to be such bipartisan support for this legislation now. What would you want to say to people who maybe are still not convinced that this is the right move for Pennsylvania?
Well, look, I would say that just because we have medical marijuana, recreational marijuana is not going away. So if someone strictly is desiring to get high, that's still there for them. This is for people who are sick. And, it's really about compassion. I really think that's the key word here, is compassion, because there's people out there who are really suffering. And, like, for instance, a little 8-year-old Anna, a friend of mine, 1 drop of oil and a piece of fudge keeps her from seizing all day long. So it's about doing the right thing for people who are sick.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on.
Watching the state capitol like everybody else this week.
Absolutely.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Are you high? What are you talking about?
This is the Full Melt.
The Full Melt Show. A marijuana discussion about news, culture, politics, and lifestyle. FullMelt.com. Toll free. 844-420-TALK. 844-420-TALK.
And we're back. Back in studio. A little different to be in the studio for a change. There in the field, doing the thing from the Hash Bash this weekend. I mean, it was cold and frigid and snowing sideways, and still there were 8,000 plus people milling around out there. Just a little strange to be back in the studio where it's dry and it's warm, and not worried about who took my headphones. I want to know who took my headphones. Who's got my headphones? Luckily, I had a spare emergency pair, which I'm using now. And actually, now that I've got the spare emergency pair back on, I actually like the spare emergency pair better than the ones that got stolen. Somebody took them. I remember specifically Hash Bash morning putting my headphones in my blue bag that I bring with us to all of our live broadcast on location events. And I remember putting them in there, and then I remember putting the bag in the car with the headphones still on top. I remember seeing that. So I know they were in the bag. And what confirmed that they were in the bag is when I got home, they still weren't here. So, and the only place that the bag went was in the car, which I remember seeing them in the car in the bag, and then to the Hash Bash where they disappeared somewhere. And it happened before we got set up. Somebody reached into the top of that bag and grabbed those headphones and just kept walking. That's what happened. It's the only thing that could have happened. They're too big to fall out. There's a big cord hanging off of them. I mean, and it was only a short walk between the vehicle and the place where we set up. But it wasn't just the headphones that got stolen from me at the Hash Bash. I also had, I had a friend give me an infused honey syringe, so that the push-up pops. It's kind of like a push-up pop, but it's just honey. And so somebody stole that from me. And then what else? There was something else that an entire pack of cigarettes also pilfered. The whole thing. It wasn't even opened. Just gone. So, I didn't need to smoke out there anyways. But we had a great time, and, I didn't anticipate that as many people would be there or stick through the entire thing, because when we got there, it was warmer, and then it got colder throughout the day, and it started snowing more and more throughout the day. And when I got back to the studio, there was a full 7 inches on the porch. So, but there wasn't quite that much snow in Ann Arbor. But it was kind of surreal to be in a near winter wonderland scenario with 8,000 people milling about as if nothing had happened, because it was the coldest day out of the previous 2 weeks, literally, by far, because the previous 2 weeks were in the 40s and 50s and sometimes the 60s, and I think we even approached 70. It wasn't quite 70 here, but it was almost there. It was like 67 or 68, so it was nice. For a spring day, it was really nice. But so I anticipated that there would be maybe a smaller turnout, because a lot of people were saying, they were canceling off the Facebook. They weren't going to go because it's all the weather and da-da-da-da-da. And I've been watching this for about 30 days out. I started watching the weather report. And what's weird is usually when it's going to be rainy or snowy on a day 30 days out, it changes. Something happens and it gets bumped forward or gets bumped backwards. It stayed rainy, then snowy. It was always going to be precipitation and cold that day. And it never changed. It never moved. As it got closer and closer, it just solidified the idea that it was going to be cold and snowy on the day that the Hash Bash happened, which I wasn't looking forward to. But as it turns out, it wasn't that bad. And people came prepared. They came dressed for success. And in many cases were wrapped in swaddling blankets. Literally just walking down the streets covered in a nice, like a comforter. A lot of people. Some people, it looked like they were in their jammies. It was almost like a jammy party for some people. And what's unusual about the Hash Bash amongst all other festivals, and I think, except for maybe the New Orleans Festival, what is that? Mardi Gras? You get the Mardi Gras where people dress up in fantastical ways. New Orleans has got the Hash Bash beat, but you get the New Orleans type people out there. Complete in outfit and uniform. So they are in some kind of get-up, a costume, not always necessarily related to cannabis. Like I saw a lot of people in banana costumes. There were a few banana costumes. But what's strange is when you see a guy in a costume that it's getting snowed on. Because the costume is partly on and partly off. It's just weird. In any event, great time at the Hash Bash. Now, on to what's going on today. Well, just think about this. I mean, we had Senator Mike Fulmer on this program about this time last year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere in this neighborhood, we had him on the air this time last year. And he was talking about this medical marijuana legislation that they had proposed and had been working on for about a year at that point, and they were getting close to getting this passed through the Senate. And I've talked about Pennsylvania and this attempt to do medical marijuana through the legislature in a very conservative state, and co-sponsored by a very conservative Republican senator. But the Senate is not the most conservative of the two houses of government in Pennsylvania, in the Commonwealth there. The most conservative House body is indeed the House. It's not that way here in Michigan. The Senate, it seems to be the more conservative of the two wings. In Pennsylvania, it's the other way around. It's the House. So the House kicked this around and needed educating. I mean, it's this medical marijuana is always a process of education, and it's a never-ending process. Look, I'm knee-deep into this every day, and I still learn something new about medical marijuana nearly every single day. I mean, something new. I mean, I completely am immersed in this topic. So I'm reading the news all the time. I'm preparing stuff for the show. I'm interviewing guests. I'm doing stuff. But so I find it, and maybe have more of an opportunity to than most people. But that being said, Senator Fulmer at that time was looking to just get this over to the House, get it passed through the Senate and get it over to the House, where he admittedly at that time was under the opinion he would have an uphill battle with getting the House onto this. And he did, because it took them another full year to get the Senate, and I'm sure there were some modifications and some changes, and they got the Senate to get in on this, or the House rather to get in on this. And the House passed, as you heard in that piece, a gut and replace thing, and got this tweaked around to where basically it was kind of the same thing, just a couple modifications from what the Senate had done. Now it's back in the Senate's hands. And so after we come back from the break, let's talk about what the Senate did today and then what might get done in the future in the state of Pennsylvania.
You're getting the full melt.
If you're like us, your pets aren't just animals. They're members of your family. Pet Pain CBD hemp oil drops are great for aging as well as active dogs and cats. Some people are apprehensive about hemp treatments for pets. They ask us, what are you smoking? Absolutely nothing, and neither will your pet. Like other hemp-based products for humans, the allure is all of the benefits of cannabis without any of the high. The CBD oil has shown to rejuvenate the bones, joints, brain, stomach, eyes, and heart. And the drops contain absolutely no corn, wheat, soy, artificial colors and flavors, or preservatives. Pick some up today. Visit petpain.com or ask for Pet Pain at your local pet store. Petpain.com. CBD relief for your pet.
When you need legal help, you don't want to guess at who's standing next to you in court. And when it comes to a medical marijuana defense, it's even smarter to partner with a lawyer before you need one. Based in Royal Oak, David Rudoy has a proven history of not being afraid to take your case all the way to the Supreme Court and win. Find the law offices of Rudoy Law
at RudoyLaw.com.
RudoyLaw.com is a quick reference on your rights concerning Michigan medical marijuana
and up-to-date news.
That's RUDOI Law.com. Call 248-935-9074 now and talk about your legal needs, because at RudoyLaw.com, we don't just stand up for you, we stand up with you.
What's up with these things, Victor?
We decided to give ourselves stickers for each feature we release.
We read about 10,000 suggestions a week to create features that, as traders, we'd want to use.
10,000 suggestions? Who reads all of those?
He does.
For all the confidence you need, TD Ameritrade. You got this.
We need coffee.
Got it right here.
Cups.
12-ounce, 8-ounce recyclable.
Creamers, sweeteners, stirrers, filters.
Creamers, sweeteners, stirrers, filters, K-Cups.
Hazelnut, French vanilla, French roast, dark, light, medium, bold, extra bold.
And decaf.
Why would you say that? Why would you say that? Why would you say that?
No reason.
Free shipping for awards members every day. Staples. Make more happen.
It's the Full Melt Radio Show.
Radio show.
And you can find us here Monday through Friday from 7 until 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Steve Green, and I've been working on this thing on Pennsylvania for quite some time now. I'm following this with a terse eye. Because, look, Pennsylvania and Ohio in general are very conservative areas. And if you've got a place like Pennsylvania or Ohio, and you can get them on board with something like medical marijuana, It's a lot easier for places like Tennessee and Kentucky and other, you start talking about other states to get on board with this. There's some history. There's some people there who are willing to kind of go before you, who also occupy your same space. And if they're going to change their minds about this, boy, it's kind of like getting a recommendation from a family member or a friend on a product or a service. You're going to put a lot more stock and weight in what they've got to say about something that maybe you even from the outside had a completely different opinion about. But you might believe them now because your friend told you, your family member recommended you to this thing. And much the same goes with a place like Ohio or Pennsylvania. If the other conservative states, mostly in the South, the Southeast for the most part, then again, like friends and neighbors, they kind of occupy the same conservative stance. So you get part of that to break apart and say, look, there's a need for this. And we've gone through all the stuff to make sure that, we aren't contributing to the delinquency of drug use in the country. We're doing this in a responsible way and for good reason, for a meritorious cause. I mean, there's an underpinning to this. And it's meaningful. It has impact. It really has an effect on people. And in this case, on extremely ill people. So it's hard to look at sick people and draw a frowny face, right? I mean, these people didn't choose to be sick. They didn't choose to have these conditions. They didn't necessarily even contribute to them. They're really victim of them. And so as victims, we look at them in a more favorable light. It's hard to demonize a victim, although people sometimes do. Certainly, our friends in law enforcement here in the state of Michigan have done a lot of that. We'll save that for another day. Back to Pennsylvania and Ohio, really, too. The core of the subject today, obviously, Pennsylvania. So, spoiler alert, nothing happened today. Nothing happened there. They canceled this vote. But before we get into that, I wanted to play this bit. This is kind of the educating of the populace, so to speak. This is the kind of thing people in Pennsylvania, specifically legislators, had to see to have any faith in what people were saying about medical marijuana there. Listen to this.
The Pennsylvania Senate could vote this week on a medical marijuana bill. Now, if passed, Governor Tom Wolf has already said he will sign it. Hundreds of parents across the mid-state are hoping once the bill becomes law, their children can finally have access to the medication. This morning, we are joined by Chris and Angela Farrow of York County to talk about their personal experience. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
So tell me about your son, Michael, and how medical marijuana has helped him.
How it will help him.
How it will help him.
Sure. Well, Michael has a condition known as Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and it affects all areas of his life, specifically the seizures. And one of the seizure types that affects him most is his photosensitive epilepsy, which makes it very difficult to go outside, play like a normal child.
Sure.
So our hope is that medical cannabis becomes legal and we are able to have that as an option for Michael.
Were you ever able to think about accessing it from somewhere else?
We've considered it, and we've certainly looked into the possibility. And based upon the law right now, our hands are tied in certain ways. But we're incredibly optimistic that this is going to pass, and we're incredibly optimistic that our home state's going to give us the opportunity to make this treatment available for Michael.
Now, Angela, you've been working on getting legislation like this passed in Pennsylvania for 3 years. This week, we may finally see the culmination of those efforts. What is that like for you?
Relief. I can't wait for the day that I step into the Capitol for the last time. It will be a relief.
We saw a couple weeks ago, we saw that the State House passed it, and people were cheering in the Capitol, and everybody thought that it was such a momentous moment, and we haven't heard anything for weeks. Has that been frustrating, that it kind of
fizzled out, quieted down, so to speak. It was definitely frustrating to know that it wasn't going to be passed into law right away, but we knew that the Senate had to look at the bill that was sent over from the House, and we're just hoping that, this week actually will be, that week that we'll get an answer.
And is time of the essence for so many families? I mean, I can't imagine watching my child suffer for 1 minute, let alone 3 years, the fight that you guys have had.
Absolutely. Again, we're not asking for the legislator to give us marijuana. We're just asking for them to give our doctors the ability to prescribe it if they believe it's necessary. And we are frustrated, but we also have this sense of optimism that the legislator will come together on an issue that I think is broadly supported, and understand that if we can ease some suffering of some kids and some adults with cancer and epilepsy, that it's really a no-brainer. So we just hope that this is the week finally that the end of the advocacy, at least on our part, is done.
And what have Michael's doctors told you about how this could help him?
They're optimistic as well. Michael has gone through every treatment available, so it really is our only option at this point. So, yeah.
So like everyone else, you're going to be watching the Capitol very closely this week, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Paying very close attention to what is going on there in Pennsylvania, and I already described why. But see, these people, it's the efforts of people like these who've been working for 3 long years at just turning legislators' heads around on straight. Because all of these legislators had their heads cocked over opine and baggage that they brought in from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s about the drug war. Really, the peak of the drug war. That's where all that stuff occurred. Mostly in those places, those 3 decades. Before that, there was no scheduled order of drugs. There was no Controlled Substance Act. That didn't happen. They didn't schedule these drugs 1 through 5 in order of their dangerousness or, availability. 1 being the worst, which is where cannabis is. And they didn't even call it cannabis. They used the pejorative term marijuana, which was really a foreign slang term. You see, it tells you, based in the wrapper itself, where this information came from. It came from people who wanted to twist the truth, the reality of something, to make you afraid of it so that they could profit from that process. That's exactly what happened. So I'd like to really try and extend myself back out to Senator Fulmer again, because I really already came on the air a couple of weeks ago and reported that this was done deal. And I still stand on that notion. I still think this is, in Pennsylvania, a done deal. I'm not discouraged by the delay whatsoever. In fact, I think the delay, based on all the reporting that's been done, is really wrapped again in technical aspect, not in substance. To say that in a better way, I guess, the information and the way that it handles medical marijuana isn't at issue. What is the way that the terms are used. Because some of that terminology, if it isn't done right, can mean something different. And I think that's what they're looking at, is making sure that they crossed their T's and dotted their I's. That's really all that is. I am solely, let me modify that, strike that. I am absolutely certain that, based on what I know here now, that they're going to do this probably this week in Pennsylvania. And then there are 2 more questions that are begged. Number 1, the first question is, because he said right there in that second piece, that kid's father said, look, we're not asking the senators to give us marijuana. We're just asking them to tell the doctors they can recommend this. When he said prescribe. See, that's one of those terms. See, if you say prescribe has a definition attached to it that comes from the American Medical Association and also, more specifically, the DEA and the way that drugs are handled through the current system of FDA approval. And the controls and mechanisms, the checks and balances put in place so that doctors prescribe medication and then have no connection to the dispensing of that medication. Otherwise, you could just go to your doctor. He could write you. Why would he write you a prescription if he could just dispense it to you? Here, let me get it on the cabinet. See, that's how they used to do it. See, especially when the doctor would come around to your house, right? Those visiting house doctors with the bags back in the 1800s and the early 1900s, they would come out and they wouldn't write you a prescription that you'd have to then go to the druggist to get filled. They would just come out with the medication, as many as they could keep that could cover as many emergency situations as possible in their bag of medicine. And whatever wasn't in that immediate doctor's bag was likely in the doctor's vehicle. So they would just dispense the medication on site and leave you with enough medication to treat you with. But see, people saw a conflict of interest in these two things being mixed together, the guy that's doing the prescribing and also the selling of the drugs. Because now he might prescribe you a drug just to profit from the drugs that he'd be selling you, when you really didn't have a problem at all. See, they didn't like the idea that could remain a possibility. So to prevent the appearance of impropriety between these two specific acts, they separated this out and created druggists. They created pharmacists so that the pharmacist had a specific role. Now, these guys are actually trained, I think, to a higher degree than doctors are. I think in order to be a pharmacist, you've got to go to school longer. So they have a great deal of knowledge of information about these drugs specifically, but I mean, really, they've got a lot of schooling in them, these pharmacists. And so in this instance, if you use the term, we're talking about the law here in Pennsylvania, as it might stand. I'm just using an example because I don't know for sure. I haven't looked at the language of the bill that is currently being looked over. I did look at the previous language before they gutted it and changed it in the House. But now they've sent that language back to the Senate to sign off on. And the people in the Senate are like, oh, wait a minute. This word and this word and this word, these are not the right words. You can't use those words. And I'm using prescription as an example. Because prescription if you were, say, in the language of the law, that the doctors are allowed to prescribe this medication, okay, you might pass that law, but at the end of the day, no doctor is going to write a prescription for marijuana. Not a single doctor ever will do this. And the reason is because they place their prescription writing ability, their drug license, through the Drug Enforcement Administration, because that's who gives them the license to distribute drugs, is the DEA. They're the ones that issue that license. And you're putting it at certain risk when you're prescribing a drug that has no perceived or allowable medical use, and that it's unsafe for consumption or use under a doctor's supervision. That's what Schedule 1 means. A high propensity for abuse, no accepted medical use, dangerous for use even under a doctor's supervision. So they would right away take your drug license because you're prescribing a medication that has no testing attached. You can't give a certain dose of marijuana because there's no dosing recommended based on the studies that haven't been done. You see, this is how all other drugs are handled. You're doing this in a way that is antithetical to the drug prescription process. So the way that states handle this, for those who don't know, is they give the doctor the ability to recommend, so to provide a recommendation or a qualification that this person, A, has a certain condition, and B, is likely to receive palliative effect from the use of cannabis as an aid in relieving their symptoms or underlying condition. So they could recommend it. They're not prescribing it, because in order to prescribe it, you have to have a duration of the treatment, right? How long can you take this for? There has to be some study that underlies it that says what is a fatal dose, what are the side effects, and these are all things that are unknown in something like cannabis from an official standpoint, from a Western medicine standpoint. We all know what those effects are and what the dangers are and what the side effects are. The dangers are nearly nil. They're nearly zero. We're talking about the consumption of cannabis, and I don't care what form it's in. They're nearly zero. You're not going to overdose on this. You're not going to get hurt by it. And that's what makes it, I think, one of the most benign natural medicines on the face of the planet, honestly. And I didn't used to be one of these guys telling, oh, medical marijuana, oh, marijuana. I wasn't one of those guys. I was one of the guys going, hey, you can get high from this, and I like it. I was one of those guys. I was not, one of the hippie guys saved the earth thing with the hemp, although I loved what they had to say. These people in Pennsylvania have to do it right, because the question that I said, we started this conversation about the questions begged, the first one is, how are you getting this medicine? Because he just said they're not asking the senator to give them the marijuana. They're asking them to let their doctor prescribe it. I think what he meant was, if he was a little more educated about it, let their doctors recommend this. Now the question is, how are they going to get it? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to ask Senator Fulmer. What is the mechanism for delivery? Because there are a lot of people in Florida who've had medical marijuana available to their kids for a couple of years now. Nobody can buy it because it isn't being made. It's finally starting to be made, but it's not even in a place where they can get it on the shelf yet. And there are other business interests involved with this. The Stanley brothers amongst them. They've got their foot right in that pie. And I don't know that all of it is just about, being philanthropic. I think there's definitely a money angle to be looked at here. And then the other question is, if GW Pharmaceuticals gets, and I think they will, probably later this year or early next year, get final approval on CBDs as an epileptic treatment in their medication, does this angle about using kids as a lever for your legislature to write some kind of medical marijuana bill, does that go away? I want to explore that a little bit next after we come back following the break. Stand by.
You're getting the full melt.
I've seen things no man should bear, and those that every man should dare. From the beaches of Normandy to the far reaches of the earth. In my life, I have lived millions of lives. I've outrun robots and danced with dinosaurs. I've faced the faces of fear and fortitude and witnessed great beauty in the making. I've kept the company of kings and queens, but I'm no royalty or saint. I've traveled, trekked, wandered, and roamed, only to find myself right where I belong.
Jeep. See your authorized Jeep retailer for details on how you can become a Jeep owner.
We asked people to tell us something that happened in their past and something that might happen in their future. The good things were put on yellow magnets and the bad ones on blue. The results show the past was a pretty even mix of good and bad, yet the future was almost all good things. Now that you've seen the results of this experiment, what does it mean to you?
We all want to think about positive stuff.
Realistically, there will be downtimes.
It's great to think optimistically, but let's plan for whatever the future might bring.
Prudential, bring your challenges.
RootMetrics, in the nation's largest independent study, tested wireless performance across the country. Verizon won big with 153 state wins. AT&T got 38, Sprint got 2, and T-Mobile got 0. Verizon also won first in the U.S. for data, call, speed, and reliability. AT&T got text. Stuck on an average network? Join Verizon, and we'll cover your cost to switch.
Introducing Sacred Elements, a place for natural and alternative healing for the mind, body, and soul. Sacred Elements. It's one place, all solutions.
Registered, licensed, certified, ordained.
Sacred Elements.
Massage, hypnosis, Reiki.
Sacred Elements.
Raindrop, aroma and color therapy, body detox, ministry, life coaching, weight and nutrition counseling.
Sacred Elements. Next to the Sweet Leaf, 400 South Dort Highway, Flint.
11 to 7 daily, closed Sunday.
Call 810-259-2570. Hey, it's Steve Green for the Sweet Leaf in Flint, because now getting safe access to medical cannabis patients in Flint, Michigan is never more welcoming. Presenting the Sweet Leaf, a brand new patient experience, bringing 12 carefully selected caregivers housed in 9 separate offices to distinctly assist you with their knowledge and reputation for excellent patient care. Classes and training coming soon in the large community room. Check it out in person, 400 South Door Highway, or call 810-259-2571. The Sweet Leaf Center in Flint, 810-259-2571. It's the Full Melt Radio Show. The iTunes Store. I'm still sober. It's really not the iTunes Store. It's the Apple App Store. Don't go to iTunes because you won't find us in the iTunes Store. Go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. And down the level, just type right there in the search bar, The Full Melt Show. The Full Melt Show, and you'll find the mobile app exclusively containing our program. Here's Bernie Sanders.
We can argue, and scientists do, the pluses and minuses of marijuana, but everybody knows marijuana is not a killer drug like heroin. And that is why I have introduced legislation to take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. It should not be a federal crime.
That's right. That's exactly right, Bernie Sanders. That's why I love you, Bernie. Look, everybody wants to yell about Bernie Sanders. Oh, he's a socialist. Socialism, then communism. No, you're just a whiny bitch. I don't want to hear your socialist nonsense. Look, some of the most popular things we have in this country are indeed socialist in nature. Who in their right mind is going to argue that they shouldn't have a fire department? Fire departments are socialist. Who doesn't want a police department? Police departments are indeed socialist. Who doesn't like their Social Security check when they get old? Oh, that's another socialist idea. Who doesn't want universal health care? Another popular socialist idea. And I'm not saying that we should have a socialist government. I am saying that we should have some socialist policies because, number one, people like them, and number two, they're important. That's all I got to say about that. Now, back to this thing about marijuana in Pennsylvania as a medicine. and whether or not this idea about holding kids up with epileptic problems or seizure disorders that are intractable. This means that there is no standard medicine that they can give or therapy that they can give these kids to make them stop seizing. And the seizures in many cases are nearly constant. I mean, when you're talking about having 500 seizures in the course of even a couple of days, that's nearly constant seizing. And every time that happens, those kids are at risk of dying. They're also not in a place mentally or physically where they can learn anything. So they become learning disabled as a result. They become behind the times. So even if these kids get to a place where they're not seizing all the time, they still got to catch up educationally with their peer groups. And kids are. But the question I'm posing is, if places like Pennsylvania get this done legislatively in conservative areas, that's all great news for the medical marijuana movement. Because like I say, the other conservative people in the country who are traditionally roadblocks to this progress might look at it more seriously because coming from their friends, it is a little more legitimate to them. It has meaning attached. They believe they're friends. We already have political alignment. What spun your head around? Why are you different about this? Wait a minute, you're not one of those communist lefties, are you? I mean, that's what they'll say. But then when they talk to their friend a little bit, their colleague from another state, they start to realize, wow, I didn't know that. Seriously, that's you guys looked at all that and you found, yeah, that's what we found. are they going to be able to use this as leverage in other states that still have this question to be met? And in states where they've only passed cannabis oil designed almost nearly exclusively for children alone, leaving all the other people with chronic illness aside from the medical marijuana question, completely leaving them out, even in places like that. Will they continue to have this program or continue to have this leverage, this tool, this angle? I say the answer is no. I say that leverage, that key, that ability, that specific law nearly disappears the moment GW Pharmaceuticals releases an FDA-approved whole plant medicine designed for epilepsy, goodbye poster child for the medical marijuana community. Goes away. Look, it's also at the same time going to legitimize that very same thing. But people who are behind, have investment in GW Pharmaceuticals and the federal government who put them through all the hoops of getting that stuff approved, even though they couldn't do those medical studies here, they had to start them in another country, Israel. There's no way that they're going to let that medicine continue to be so, what's the word I want to, cottage industry. They're not going to let you sell your cottage industry medical cannabis therapy, regardless of how valuable and accurate it works, regardless of its efficacy. There's too many questions with your brew. We don't know where it came from. You didn't go through the approval rungs that the gold standard of FDA clearance through clinical drug phase 3 clinical trials provides. And so because of that, and at GW did, we're going to outlaw, ban, or otherwise put an obstacle in place for your cottage industry oils. That's what's coming down the pike, inevitably. So get prepared for that. So I'm glad that places like Pennsylvania are using that as a tool now before it is no longer available to them. They had the conversation, and in Pennsylvania's case, they were beyond just epilepsy and kids. They covered it in other ways. They do not have you're not allowed to buy and sell and consume flour by way of smoking. They will not let you do what you can do here in Michigan, which is to roll a joint and smoke it, or put it in a bong or a pipe and consume it through inhalation of smoke. What they will, I believe, let you do is vaporize it, which is a much probably healthier way of doing it anyways. And I think that extracts are allowed there. Clearly they are allowed. And people will be making extracts and vaporizing those extracts and consuming those cannabinoids in that way. Pennsylvania, when the governor, Mr. Wolf, signs this legislation, and he will, he's already said he will, they will be, I believe, the first state to allow medical marijuana for the purpose and use to fight against autism. And that is a huge step. So I'm very happy about that. I got to get Fulmer on to talk about what's going on there, especially on their big win day, because this will clear a bunch of stuff off of his table and make it part of his past, his legacy, rather than a big elephant to chew on, which he's been gnawing on for a couple of years now. And this all started, remember, when ladies walked into his office with kids with epileptic seizure disorders and said, look, these other kids in other states have this available to them, and it works. Why can't my kid be that way here? Are you going to make me a medical refugee and run off to Colorado in order to save my kid's life, in order to put him in a safer place, or her? Is that what you're going to do, Senator Fulmer? Because that's the choice we're left with, is to leave the state. What does that do to the economy when people are choosing to leave the state as medical refugees? And what does that say about you guys as governors? You see, this was too hard to swallow. And after all, these parents were right. But again, this speech, this process, this thing that turned Senator Fulmer's head, who again was completely against medical marijuana, it doesn't exist. This subject turned his head. And his head turn was what got this done. Without Senator Fulmer, this would not have gotten done. And he didn't sponsor the initial legislation. There's another colleague, and his name is escaping me right now. And I think he was a Democrat in the Senate. Again, I don't have his name handy. But he was the guy that wrote this in the first place. And Senator Fulmer jumped on board when these women came to his office. And I'm just saying, that leverage disappears very soon. I'm hoping that in this coming election cycle, 2016, it's going to bring a different theater to the coming year, starting in November, because everybody will be able to look forward from that point rather than forward from that point rather than forward to that point. Because right now, it's a big question mark between here and November. Who's going to get on the ballot? What's the polling look like? Take the temperature of the voting populace, and then also try and extrapolate from whomever becomes the presidential nominees in both respective parties as Republicans and Democrats, who those people end up being as to how the voter turnout might look. Because only then will we know what these ballot initiatives across the country, and there are many of them, some of them statewide, many states, as many as 11 states expected to become either medical marijuana or retail cannabis consumers this election cycle. And then beyond that, there are different cities, not only here in Michigan, probably especially here in Michigan, but in other places around the country that have this on the ballot locally. And so looking forward from when these decisions get made, I think that this question about whether or not GW Pharmaceuticals really monopoly on kids and epilepsy as a seizure sort of treatment goes away, because cannabis may be available more widely as a retail consumption item for adults with responsible use.
You're getting the full melt.
Promotional consideration provided by NoSmell.com, pioneering the storage market for cannabis users. The NoSmell patented bag technology offers users 100% smell-proof detection from even the most sophisticated of noses. NoSmell.com, so nobody knows. When placing your order for a no-smell bag, make sure to use discount code FULLMELT and take 10% off the entire order. Learn more about no-smell technology at nosmell.com.
Young students are our future. They're eager to learn, eager to succeed, eager to make the world a better place. And they want to make it to school safely. Share the road. Take care when passing. And always leave 3 feet between you and people on bikes. Bikes are legal road vehicles. We're all drivers.
When you need legal help, you don't want to guess at who's standing next to you in court. And when it comes to a medical marijuana defense, it's even smarter to partner with a lawyer before you need one. Based in Royal Oak, David Rudoy has a proven history of not being afraid to take your case all the way to the Supreme Court and win. Find the law offices of Rudoy Law
at RudoyLaw.com.
RudoyLaw.com is a quick reference on your rights concerning Michigan medical marijuana
and up-to-date news.
That's RUDOI Law.com. Call 248-935-9074 now and talk about your legal needs, because at RudoyLaw.com, we don't just stand up for you, we stand up with you.
If you're like us, your pets aren't just animals. They're members of your family. Pet Pain CBD hemp oil drops are great for aging as well as active dogs and cats. Some people are apprehensive about hemp treatments for pets. They ask us, what are you smoking? Absolutely nothing, and neither will your pet. Like other hemp-based products for humans, the allure is all of the benefits of cannabis without any of the high. The CBD oil has shown to rejuvenate the bones, joints, brain, stomach, eyes, and heart. And the drops contain absolutely no corn, wheat, soy, artificial colors and flavors, or preservatives. Pick some up today. Visit PetPain.com or ask for Pet Pain at your local pet store. PetPain.com. CBD relief for your pet.
Hey, it's Steve Green for the Sweet Leaf in Flint, because now getting safe access to medical cannabis patients in Flint, Michigan is never more welcoming. Presenting the Sweet Leaf, a brand new patient experience, bringing 12 carefully selected caregivers housed in 9 separate offices to distinctly assist you with their knowledge and reputation for excellent patient care. Classes and training coming soon in the large community room. Check it out in person, 400 South Door Highway, or call 810-259-2571. The Sweet Leaf Center in Flint, 810-259-2571. 571. It's the Full Melt Radio Show. You know, while we were enjoying the snow in Ann Arbor this weekend for the Hash Bash and our live broadcast, which incidentally featured Dan Skye. And by the way, we've got Dan Skye's from High Times Magazine, the editor-in-chief, talking about the Cannabis Cup coming twice to Michigan this year. Amazing. In June, 10th and 11th. And then also again at the end of August. So we get 2 visits from the Cannabis Cup. While we were out busy enjoying the snow and all the refreshments available to us in Ann Arbor at the Monroe Street Fair, this was going on in our nation's capital.
Marijuana activists took a drag in front of the White House as a statement that the drug shouldn't be considered dangerous. Protesters also had originally planned to display a 51-foot-long inflatable joint at Saturday's demonstration, but protest organizer Adam Ettinger said the Secret Service wouldn't allow it, citing security concerns. And although having up to 2 ounces of pot is legal in the nation's capital and smoking it in public is illegal, no arrests were made.
That's not quite exactly true. There were a couple of arrests made, but I don't know that they were for cannabis consumption. I do know that what they left out of that Australian report, because that was a report from Australia, who's doing their own medical marijuana thing now. You see monkey do. What they left out of the report was the fact that they inflated this giant joint, and it was a big, plastic joint. It didn't have helium in it. It was just an inflatable, like a punching bag. But it was a big, long, white tube of plastic, and it could clearly look like a garbage bag at one end, because the end that they had collapsed together to form the end of the joint and painted black and red to signify the end of a joint on fire, was all ripply, and you could tell it was spray painted. And then on the side of it had some kind of message about, marijuana shouldn't be prohibited, that kind of thing. And they had inflated this thing some distance from the White House to carry it on their shoulders, almost in effigy, to the protest at the Capitol steps. And then the plan was to light up and smoke on the Capitol steps in protest of the national prohibition of marijuana. And this is why probably people weren't arrested but see, now they weren't allowed to smoke in public, but they did anyways, and they kind of looked the other way. What they wouldn't let them do is carry the giant joint on their shoulders, citing security concerns. Now, I don't know what the security concern would be, because it's just, a non-floating float, right? I mean, this is no different than the Macy's parade. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. It's not going to come. Oh, I was so close to sneezing. I hate it when that happens. Ugh. It was coming, and then it went. They made them deflate it. So they deflated the balloon, and this thing is like 60, 70, 80 feet long. They deflated this giant thing, and this thing had to be big. Even when it was deflated, it still had to occupy like a few trash bags, right? Somehow they secreted this thing down the road, deflated, to the place where the protest occurred, and they reinflated it. I just think that it was funny. Now, it wasn't the Capitol Police, and that's who you'd think would take action here, is the Capitol Police. The Capitol Police weren't the ones blocking said inflatable doobie. The people that were doing the blocking were indeed the Secret Service. So security's concern from the Secret Service, you see, the Secret Service doesn't guard the White House. The Capitol Police do. They don't, that's the Capitol Police guard that. The Secret Service guard the residents of the White House, right? But the fact of the matter is that President Obama wasn't even at the White House. He was out on the back nine golfing. Not anywhere near there. The family, I don't know if the family was around, but I don't know what possible threat could be posed by a giant inflatable doobie other than the threat of humility. Because that's all you'd get is some humbling over the idea that protesters had to create a giant inflatable sign to get a message across to the White House, which is, Mr. Obama, on your way out of the White House, because we know you can't become president again, Mr. Obama, won't you do the right thing as the commander-in-chief, as our president, as the executive in control of the executive branch, and as an extension of the executive branch, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, or the ONDCP, can completely and uniformly, unilaterally deschedule marijuana from the Controlled Substance Act. That arm, that branch of the White House, completely controls drug policy in the nation. That one thing alone. So, Mr. Obama, won't you go in and use your authority through your executive branch in the Office of National Drug Control Policy and change the scheduling of marijuana from 1 to a 5? Or maybe just take it off the list altogether. And then all this arguing from the FDA and the DEA and all this other crap on a federal level would end. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end game for marijuana in this country. And last week I had some boorish old lady on who probably has not but a few months left on this planet, just based on her looks and based on her disposition and demeanor. Had to come on the air and talk about how if this gets done in California, the rest of the nation will follow. You are so true, old lady. That's exactly what's going to happen. And you and the rest of the naysayers and the snobbish nose, the brutish ass lickers of the country, you guys who are up on your high horses about cannabis and I would just label as general dumbass prohibitionists, the whole lot of you, need to accept the fact that this is a done deal. It's not going away. It's only going to get bigger and broader, and eventually you're going to have to wrestle this yourself. First, through acceptance, and then through normal, everyday, logical manipulation. That's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to manipulate this back in your favor. I would say that is a task that isn't worth taking on. Because, again, you're not putting the genie back in the bottle. Why don't you just put your hands in the air and go the other way? Because that's the best. That's the way you get off the cheapest. That's the least taxing and makes the most sense. The drug war always was a sham. It's never achieved any of its goals. It costs our taxpayers tons of money, and it breaks up families and incarcerates people across the country as citizens, nonviolent drug offenders. They're everywhere, and they're not going away either. So the policy's getting changed. Things are happening across the country, and it's this season, this year, 2016, where we're going to see the end game, where we're going to see the fruits of our labor, where we're going to see history change before our eyes. And as these things do, the achievement is only the beginning. When prohibition of alcohol ended in 1931? When prohibition of alcohol ended, when they abolished the 18th Amendment, which only dealt with alcohol, this didn't go away. It was only the beginning for the fight for alcohol, for those who would champion alcohol's use. It took a long time to make these things more homogenous across the country, and even today's date, brings various and sundry forms of alcohol law all across our great country. Much the same will be the truth about cannabis. We'll see you tomorrow.
The Full Melt Show is a production of TFM Media.